Idealistically, I love to call myself as an anarchist, the Adam Smith kinds. But realistically, we live in a world which does not largely function on anarchist principles per se. We live amidst multiple systems, and so it becomes really important for us to decide in relation to those systems where we stand on the political spectrum. Let's talk. Broadly speaking, the political spectrum is divided into the right wing and the left wing. In USA, this becomes the Republicans and the Democrats. In the UK, this becomes the Conservatives and the Democrats. In India, if you want to name the parties, this becomes the BJP and the Congress on a large scale. Before we go further, let's have a look at where exactly these definitions of left wing and right wing started. In 1789, in France, during the French Revolution, the French Emperor called for the French National Assembly. So there were people who were pro-change and pro-revolution, and there were people who were against change, against revolution. Basically, these were the ones who were for monarchy. So these people were seated on the right side, whereas the people who were for change and for revolution were seated to the left side of the emperor. Basically, it was a simple seating arrangement, and from there came up the left wing and the right wing. The left wing broadly are the liberals, the socialists, the communists, and the Democrats. The right wing broadly are the conservatives, the traditionalists, the nationalists. And of course, you have the center, where people who adapt a few principles from the left and a few principles from the right position themselves. Now, both the left and the right can be authoritarian. An example of left authoritarianism is Stalin, and right authoritarianism is Hitler. Now, though this division of the left wing and the right wing seems extremely convenient and easy to identify people and define where they stand on the political spectrum, in the end, it cannot be pigeonholed and it cannot be generalized. Every country has to be taken into account as a separate situation. So, for example, when you take the UK, the natives, that is the British, they have never been victims of colonization, they have never been victims of religious persecution, they have never been victims of racial discrimination. So basically, the natives have never been victims in any sense. In USA, the country is a culmination of many migrant groups. The country itself is pretty young, and so when all these groups came together, they formed a nation. Whereas in India, when you take the natives or the original inhabitants, they have been one of the oldest civilizations known to man. They have been victims of colonization, they have been victims of religious persecution, and they have been victims of discriminations on various levels. When you take the right-wing people in UK, they are not victims in any sense in history who are now trying to reclaim their identity. They have ruled all over the world and they are superpowers. So for them, the ideals of democracy, of secularism, and the idea of upholding equality holds a completely different meaning because their context and their background is different. For these people to uphold secularism and to uphold equality, to assimilate, does not in any way threaten their own identity, their own culture, or the lessening of their value. Now coming to India. Now the natives have been victims of various types of violence on their culture and their identity. And at the present moment, they are a people who are looking to reassert their value, to reassert their definitions, and to reassert their identity. For them to uphold secularism or equality might hold a slightly different meaning because their context and their background is different. They are operating not as superpowers who already have a solid foundation, but rather as victims of the past who are now asserting their identity, redefining their identity, and are trying to develop into superpowers. So in my opinion, these values of secularism, equality, democracy, and all these liberal values are, yes, very much needed in today's world because we live in a globalized civilization. But they cannot be heaped up as blind expectations on a people without actually understanding where they themselves stand at that particular moment. As soon as India gained independence, she was heaped with the expectation of being the largest democracy in the world, which of course she has tried to prove so continually in history. But at the same time, she has also suffered because of it. It is wiser to give a truer chance to the natives to get the foundation strong and then to take the next step. Now, this can also be seen as the reason for the continual religious differences and violence that we see erupting in India, which can be actually avoided. This could lead to other challenges as well. If the minorities in India are allowed to have their own personal, political, and religious freedom, but the same is denied to the Hindus just because they are a majority, then it becomes a skewed version of secularism. So, is the basis of who gets how much based only on who is a minority and who is a majority? But that itself goes completely against what secularism stands for. It applies only to the minority but not to the actual natives of the land, the ones who have been residing there since centuries. Let's take the example of immigration. Both USA and UK can afford to take in immigrants because they have the resources and the moral resources to give them a fair space and treatment. But for a developing country, this could be a challenge. The line between the left and the right are blurry and circumstantial, and more than anything, they depend on the context of the country. Now, for a developed country like Germany, which is currently under the Christian Democratic Party of Angela Merkel, they have also allowed immigration. Now, an opposite example of this is Obama, who identifies as left-wing. As a Democrat, he had initially been against same-sex marriages, which he had of course changed his stance on in line with the public's perception. So each of these values should be seen and judged not just on the basis of their Western definitions and how they would apply to a Western developed country, but rather as how they would work and if they are practical enough for a developing country. So I think it is high time that we reassess these left-wing and right-wing policies, especially in terms of India. Extreme left-wing lends into socialism and then later on communism. Is that practical and applicable in the context of India? Now, extreme right-wing view lends into fascism, which the country is of course currently accused of being. But is it really the case, or is it a mere fight for a reclamation of one's identity? Are right-wing views practical and applicable to most of the people at the same time in the context of India and its background? In India, we currently see a hodgepodge. It's a mix of ideologies from both the left and the right parties. BJP, a right party, has continued all the socialist policies of Congress. So does that make it left-wing? Now, as I said, the background of India is extremely different to the background of the countries which actually formulated these ideals and these values. So in the current political climate, where we usually see so many clashes happening on the basis of ideology, it would probably help us to take a step back and see where it is practical, where it is applicable, and where we are expecting way too much out of a country. Either we turn back and refer to the systems and the advice that our ancestors have left us, or we formulate brand new ideas and values which suit our context, our background, and our history. Something which is kind of like a custom fit for our country. But to polarize the nation and to demonize the right wing or the left wing, as the case may be, and to apply these values, these borrowed values, selectively would only be hypocritical. It is high time that we now open up to redefinitions, reassertions, rethinking our values, and a fair and free game for everybody involved. Let me know in the comments below where in the political spectrum you identify as. And as always, please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on my further videos. Until next time, take care.